Hail and well met, you beautiful, beautiful nerds. Today, I want to talk about a game that has helped me out a whole lot in 5 of my games, including 3 professional games, one home game that is ongoing right now, and one home game that I think is the most fun I've had at a D&D table, and I owe a lot of that to The Quiet Year. For a long time, we were at war with the jackals. Now, finally, we've driven them off, and we're left with this, a year of relative peace. One quiet year with which to build our community up and learn again how to work together. Come winter, the frost shepherds will arrive, and we might not survive the encounter. This is when the game will end, but we don't know about that yet. What we know is that right now, in this moment, there is an opportunity to build something. The Quiet Year has been used on the Adventure Zone, where I first encountered it, as well as I'm sure a few others, because there's about 5,000 actual Play D&D podcasts out there. Anyway, it allows everyone in the party, not just the DM, to create the setting that will later be used in their campaign. This is a great new way to start a game, and it's especially good with groups that have already played together, know they want to play more, and want to delve deeper into the things they still want from their fantasy role-playing. That said, I have played this through a few times and used it in D&D, so I want to talk about the pros and cons of using the Quiet Year in conjunction with 5e D&D. Before I get too much further, please check out Avery Alder's games at the link in the description. There is a storefront there where you can buy the physical version of The Quiet Year for around $50, and you can also download a free version of the game with a post-colonial twist called The Deep Forest. Ironically, considering I only really looked into it when doing research for this video, the Deep Forest actually includes flavor and story beats that make it, I think, better aligned with the D&D campaign creation, so I very much recommend taking a peek at that free version. The cards are also done in such a way where you don't have to buy the super fancy cards. Avery made it so that you can use an average deck of playing cards, assign different text values to them, and play like that. He's made this game very accessible, and that is one of the strengths of it, I believe. There is also a Roll20 version I use in my professional games. It is only $8.99 if you're still playing online, which is not a bad thing at all, I think. It is also possible to just like the Quiet Year for the Quiet Year. It's fun to draw out a fun little map with your friends. On that note, I am the D&D guy. I am going to talk about its use in D&D. If you want just a general breakdown of how to play the Quiet Year, I'm going to leave a link in the description. So, you know what the Quiet Year is. You maybe have some idea how to play it, or you've heard it on a podcast. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video, which is going to be talking about the pros and cons of how to use that in your game. I'm going to talk about the pros. Before I get to the cons, I'm also going to talk about some what I'm going to call fulcrum points. These are things that are neither good nor bad. They're just kind of stuff that you're going to have to deal with as a nature of the beast. Finally, when I get to the cons, I am going to be mentioning a solution to each of the problems that I am going to bring up. All right, here we go. The first major pro is that the Quiet Year is fun and it's easy. The rules are simple and approachable. The story itself is malleable. If you don't want to literally use the jackals, you can easily replace that word, and that goes the same for everything in the Quiet Year. So far, I've never encountered anyone who hasn't been able to get invested into the game of the Quiet Year, sometimes even forgetting that we're doing it for D&D. So, the Quiet Year is very fun, very easy. Second pro is that it gets everyone to take part in the creation of the world. This is a great thing for D&D in general, where there are a whole lot of problems with one person, the dungeon master, being expected to take on the cognitive load and the responsibility of world building. And it's good for players who deserve to have a part in the creativity of the game they will be playing in. The Quiet Year
did a lot to broaden my horizons on collaborative play. Even when I'm not using it, I can think back to elements of this game and just simply ask people, oh, what do you think this hobgoblin village would have done? And they can quickly answer it. We don't have to pull out the cards for that. This also sets the tone for your players helping out along the way, which we will touch on a little bit on the Fulcrum point and on the Pro. So keep that in mind that the quiet year is going to set a tone and set some expectations. Pro number 3. This is a great start that can be its own session 0. You can easily spend a few hours diving into the world building aspect while truly having a fun time just playing out the quiet year. It's easy for characters to start forming from the situations created, because ideally you should not already have characters made and then play the quiet year. You should have everybody over, say, hey, we don't have D&D planned. Let's just play this cool game. We'll draw some stuff on this big poster board. And then from out of that, they will start noticing things about the world that they've drawn, about the world that everyone's created, and say, ooh, this project that we started over here, that's actually really cool, and it never finished by the time winter came around. So my character is going to be the orc paladin that is going to take up the mantle of that. These are exactly the kind of really, really interesting backstories that you can get that is infinitely better than starting with 4 randos meet in a tavern. One other very cool pro factor is that you are going to get new ideas on the board, specifically when it comes to monsters and maybe even environments too. What I mean by this is as a DM, I tend to go towards things that I like. Go figure. So I've noticed that I have Yuan-Ti and Knowles pop up in a lot of different campaigns. Sometimes there's a storyline around the Yuan-Ti. Sometimes I just pop in a Yuan-Ti because I think they're neat. So it means that even if my players don't notice it, because I play with a whole lot of different groups, I'm using the same monsters over and over again. When I do the quiet year, if I'm doing it on Roll20, I turn on my compendium sharing, and if I do it at a table, I just smack down my monster manual and my Volos and my Mordenkainens, and then my players can kind of thumb through, and they'll be like, oh, whoa, these Kuotoa are kind of funny. I want to drop them in a swamp over there, and that's cool for me because I never in a million years would add Kuotoa. I think they're kind of lame, but that player just told me I think they're neat, and now they're here, and then that gets my creative gears turning as a DM. It's fun for a lot of people just to be able to be like, oh, I can control the monsters that add on here. It's a lot more engaging than rolling something up on a random encounter table. So just getting to add a wider breadth of, and it doesn't have to just be monsters. It can be friendly villages of Aarakocra or mountain elves. It can be that they want to see angels and Modrons show up out of a portal over here. There's a lot of creative ideas that can come from just handing your monster manual to your players and saying, what do you want to see? With the happy pros out of the way, let's talk about some of our fulcrum points. While your players will want to establish things as you're playing in D&D after you've made the world, this also sets an expectation. You will feel the pressure to allow your players to keep adding to the story rather than having a collective death of the author as you take the reins of the world building for the sake of your campaign's cohesive narrative back as the DM. This is not a bad thing, and it has made my games better, but only because I started implementing a story point rule for inspiration. Be prepared to use something like this, or generally allow for a more free-flowing group improv than what you may be used to at your D&D game. The second fulcrum point I should bring up is that the quiet year does take hours to play. The back of the box lists 3 to 4 hours. That is lowballing it, I think. That may be because whenever I'm sitting down with the crews that I have, we have a very social experience. We're talking about stuff while we're playing, where the quiet year does actually have a rule to not talk until it's your turn. Maybe abiding by that rule will work out for you. For my groups, it doesn't, and they would definitely have a bad time if I said, don't talk. So, caveat there of me not following the rules of the quiet year to a T, I will admit, is this is going to take a while. I recommend playing the condensed version that the developer did think to put in there. Third fulcrum point to be aware of. All right, you've sat down with your players, you've said, we're in a session 0, we're starting a new game. Situations will lead to character ideas, but it is extremely hard not to make your D&D character appear in the quiet year. I had 2 experiences where I had to save a sinking ship of a campaign that already had characters made. So I encouraged people to play the quiet year as their characters that existed, their kobold wizard and whatnot, rather than as the abstract forces that you're supposed to use in the game. This came about because a professional DM left the job suddenly and I had to take care of all the clients that still wanted to play with us. But it came about because I said, hey, we're going to play the quiet year to start up a new world. The old one is gone. Let's go here. And the players said, well, we still want to play our characters. We still want to make skill rolls and all that jazz. This did not work. This is not the quiet year's fault, as some of you may have already been commenting. This was my experiment, and while I suppose it wasn't a total failure because I was able to take things from there and run one solid campaign afterwards and one that kind of fell apart, I still think it would have been better had I told the players the hard truths that there's no recapturing the old magic that they had with their old crew and their old DM, so we should just start fresh with new characters after we play the quiet year. This does lead into my first and most obvious con. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is not made for this. Maybe it should be, and I would totally get behind WotC creating their own version of a collaborative world-building supplement for 1D&D. There you go, WotC. I just said you could have some of my money. Monetize me, baby! But as it stands, the Quiet Year and D&D 5e are 2 puzzle pieces that aren't made to fit together. You will have to take on the work of recognizing the hurdles I'm attempting to outline here and adjust both the experiences accordingly. Not to say it can't work, because I've made it work. Just like with my Can You Play videos, I am telling you that the transition between these 2 mediums are not seamless, and the separation between the quiet year and your eventual campaign will leave some bright neon seams that will always be present. My advice is to own it. Let your players know this is different, and you want to embrace what is different and cool about the quiet year, but it is not the standard D&D experience. Our second con is that while you are able to set a vast and complex world with input from multiple players and yourself, your finished quiet year map can feel like a checklist of things you must address during the campaign. My advice for this is to temper the expectations when you introduce the quiet year. Not every Westeros subplot gets its own episode, and that will be the case for your quiet year world. Try to identify 1 or 2 things that each player really seems excited about, and address those as pleasant surprises down the line. But focus more of your DM attention on the aspects of the world that everyone latches onto, and make the A-plot about those things. The third con is that I am telling you about one more thing to buy, one more thing you're going to have to teach, to learn, and to get good at. This is a minor con, but it is noticeable and unavoidable. Would you rather spend your next $50 on a settings book or a collaborative setting building game? For my vote, the Quiet Year would be my pick, but your own preferences may vary. My advice is to consider all factors, seek a second opinion that's not just me, and make an educated decision with your hobby budget and cognitive load in mind. The fourth con for you DMs out there is that you may have to sit this one out. The Quiet Year goes through a lot of info in the 4 hours you'll be creating it, and my most effective game was one where I let others do all the creativity while I sat back and kept a journal. This felt like more of a necessity in my professional games, where the service I was selling of create your own world might be sullied had I let my own ideas and influence poison the waters, so to speak. I have some pretty good ideas, but I also have a little goblin brain that finds it easier to latch on to my own precious concepts than fully embrace and add on to others while it's all happening simultaneously. Now, maybe that's a personal issue I have, and you have a 0% goblin brain, but I think this is worth a warning. When I was able to remove myself from the creative aspects, I was in a better position to observe, take notes, and occasionally provide a neutral voice to adjudicate Quiet Year's few rules and avoid contempt between my players. My advice for this: play the first season of Spring with your players to provide a good example, and after that, sit out, take notes, adjudicate. These little drawings and projects will turn into plot points, and you will want to get your narrative gears turning early. And that's it. That's the whole video. Thank you so much for watching. If you are curious to try out A Quiet Year, please go to buriedwithoutceremony.com. Are you perhaps afraid of simply walking into a collaborative world-building game? Would you like a possibly definitely unstable guide to take you there? Holla at your boy and go to truesightdnd.com. Thank you. Have a nat 20 day. Bye-bye.